the files and then re-upload them to our website. But as Conte said, oh, how exciting. Sorry, my computer is telling me that I'm speaking in French, and I am not, so I'm going to fix that. But you all can speak in French today and interact in French because we do have simultaneous translation on the call today, as Conte was mentioning. So just a reminder to speak slowly and as clearly as possible when you're presenting or asking questions, and to select the correct option for you in terms of interpretation at the bottom in case people come in French or English and you prefer to listen or participate in another language. We have a fairly quick, well, I won't say it'll be quick because they never are quick conversations, are they? But we have a fairly simple agenda today with two main topics for discussion in terms of the G7 engagement through the Civil Society 7 process, and an update from our colleagues at GFAN Asia Pacific, who've launched their replenishment campaign more now than ever. And just to give us a quick introduction in terms of the G7 process, as all of you know, the G7 is being hosted by Canada this year, which is extra exciting because we are also in an election right now. And who knew that was going to happen? Because I think Canadians were feeling a little bit left out every time the Global Fund and our advocacy community got together and said, you know, Canada's going to be fine. It's chaos everywhere else. There might be an election late towards the replenishment. So instead, we have a new prime minister who was sworn in about a week before an election call. And so over the next few months, until the end of April, the election is underway. And then, you know, it takes time to assess the outcomes, swear in new cabinets, those kinds of things to know where the advocacy entry points are. And with a planned June G7 meeting, that makes the G7 situation very exciting and interesting. So we will be hearing from two colleagues from Canada on that. And like I said, we'll hear from Ken and I think Rachel from Asia Pacific. So we've pulled down our presentation, and I think Robin or Janet, did you want to put your presentation up and go through it yourself? Yeah, okay, there we go, perfect. So I am just gonna pass it over. We're really excited to work with Janet from the HIV Legal Network here in Canada. Some of you may have come across the organization as they've been active in the space for many years. But Janet, I think this might be your first sort of big GFAN call, so welcome. And we also have Robin Montgomery, who has been supporting and active on the CC here in Canada, as she has done in previous years, so you've heard from her. But Janet, Robin, I will pass it over to you. Thank you for joining, and we'll give you time for your updates, and then we'll open it for Q&A and discussion.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Katie. And hi to everyone. Really great to be on the call here today with you. My name is Robin Montgomery, and I'm based on the traditional unceded territories of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nations here in what we now know as Turtle Island, which is Canada, and in Ottawa. Looking forward to seeing many of you in the next couple of weeks at the GFAN annual meeting. And at the same time, there is also going to be, just following the GFAN meeting, the C7 Summit. So we're really excited to be here today to share with you some updates and plans moving forward. But before I go any further, it's my great pleasure to introduce Janet, who is going to give a few words about herself and about the Legal Network. This is a group that I've worked with for many, many years. And they bring power and strength, not only from a Canadian perspective, from a global perspective, but have the legal recognition and the experience with court cases and advocacy and policy that will really help to accentuate all of our work this year under the Civil G7 and Canada's presidency. So Janet, over to you just to say hi and welcome.
Sure. Well, Thank you so much. That's a lovely introduction to the organization, and an organization of which I'm extraordinarily proud to be one of two co-executive directors. So I'm speaking to you from Toronto, or Treaty 13 territories in Toronto. But like Robin said, the HIV legal network, ou en français, le réseau juridique VIH, we're about 33 years old and born of the AIDS movement. We work to promote the health and human rights of people living with AIDS, but also have expanded our mandate and been working in this space for a long time around populations who are disproportionately affected by punitive laws and policies. I think, people who use drugs, sex workers, 2S LGBTQ plus people in various parts around the world, and a lot of work around HIV criminalization as well. With regret, I'll have to leave at about 9:30 today because we're actively engaged in a court challenge around supervised consumption sites here in Ontario. So it gives you maybe a sense of the fact that we work both locally, provincially, federally, and at the international level. We've actually been longtime advisors of the Global Fund, technical advisors in many parts of the world, and have quite a few connections there. So we're just extraordinarily excited to be working with all of you and with Robin on ensuring that health and human rights are front and center in the C7 agenda. And obviously that we work towards a strong recommitment to the Global Fund replenishment this year.
Wonderful. Thanks, Janet, and completely understand. These court proceedings are extremely important in the North American context and more globally, but particularly in the North American context, in Canada in particular. So thank you. All right, friends. So today's update is really at a high level and really looking forward to discussion and questions and answers. But it is an update that's intended to provide some background on what has been happening around the G7 and more particularly the civil G7 and how we as advocates can get engaged in the process. So just recently, we have, together with Janet and the team at the Legal Network, have created an informal Civil 7 Global Health Working Group. Now, there are a couple of reasons for this. The first is, as you may know, there are a number of officially recognized engagement groups with the G7 process. And the civil G7 or the C7 is one of the officially recognized engagement groups. This year, as we will see, global health is not particularly focused as a separate issue or a cross-cutting theme in the Civil 7 discussions. It is part of one of the working groups, but given everything that we have seen and are experiencing currently, global health really is the driver of, or one of the key drivers to the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals, and in particular, SDG 3. So we really felt that it was very important that global health was well reflected within the G7 process and the Civil 7 process. So we're working alongside the official hosts of the Civil 7, which is Cooperation Canada, and they are a Canadian umbrella network that focus specifically on international development and humanitarian assistance here in Canada. And so the purpose of the informal group is to ensure that global health, and by way of that, as Janet had mentioned, that there is strong recommitment from all G7 leaders for a fully funded global fund in the 8th replenishment, that global health issues, carry through and are well profiled and influence the discussions at multiple levels within the G7 agenda. Global health has been a key issue and a formal agenda item on previous G7 agendas. And as such, there has always been a civil society or a C7 working group on global health. So what we're trying to do here too is to sustain historical memory, which is to pull through the key issues, the key messages, and the key commitments that G7 leaders have made in previous years so that they are reflected and still remain pertinent and relevant, and we are able to hold them accountable in this year's very unusual geopolitical situation. So how we engage with each other. So we just held our first informal working group call. That was last week. We engaged through a Google group, as well as a series of meetings that are through Zoom. And I'll give you a little bit more information about that if you would like to join us. So encouraging the sharing of information amongst ourselves and sharing of intel, sharing of lessons learned through the Google group. And we work very, very closely with the supporting team who are our key advocates from G7 civil society advocates that have been leading on global health in previous presidencies. So why is the G7 particularly important this year? Well, I'm not going to go through all of this. I think everyone knows what the context is, right? But it's really important to acknowledge what we are dealing with, both in terms of the geopolitical landscape, the global health and development and financing landscape, and the incredibly fast rollbacks on the shrinking space for civil society and community-led responses. It's the erosion is like something we've never seen before. And so going into the G7, we've already heard about a number of G7 leader countries that are pulling back on their ODA and moving it more towards defense and military spending and trade wars. We know about the global gag rule, the recoiling on diversity, equity, and inclusion, or woke programming, and the US withdrawal from foreign aid. We also know about the impact that this is all going to have on the climate agenda and the challenge that we have with a very well-funded populist anti-rights movement. So altogether, this makes the G7 this year, since it's unfolding as we speak, even more important for civil society and community engagement and advocacy, to hold our government leaders to account for the commitments that they have made, to hold tight to the language that we have fought so hard for, and for the representation of all of our key and vulnerable populations, so that they are not left on the margins of an HIV and global health response. So the G7 and the Canadian political landscape. So as Katie was mentioning, Canada's political situation currently is in a precarious position because we are in an election period. So as you'll see down here in bullet point 3, the writ officially dropped on Sunday, March 23rd, which means we are in election mode. What does this mean for us? Well, it means that the government is in something called a caretaker mode. And although the bureaucrats continue to work forward on all of the things that they're currently working on, it means that decision makers, policy makers, members of parliament are not meeting with the public, and no major decisions are able to be made. So members of parliament in particular are back in their constituencies, in their ridings, engaged in election campaigns. So what does this mean for our advocacy? Well, on a Canadian level, I think for Canadian advocates, it really means that there's lots of opportunity to engage with our members of parliament on the ground in their different constituencies. What does this mean for the C7 summit, which is happening the 14th and the 15th of April, which is essentially 2 weeks away? I think there are opportunities for a number of things, including letters, face-to-face engagement, also with, the diplomatic community in the different embassies that are based here in Ottawa. But also, opportunities to have it profiled within the media, and perhaps even different interviews.
Yeah, I'll just interject there for 1 second, Robin. I think it's a really interesting time politically, because as Canada tries to distinguish itself from the US administration, I think there'll be a lot more opportunities around narrative work about kind of the importance of maintaining presence and leadership within multilateral spaces. And obviously that has impact on the global fund replenishment. So I do think that even before when we're looking at kind of what the conservative angle around some of these institutions and processes and funds were, I think there's an opportunity to do some real mind changing, especially because we've seen the US withdraw so abruptly and, critically from a lot of these spaces. So I do think as we're looking at what is Canada type election, there is opportunity for really intelligence gathering and that narrative change.
Thanks, Janet. I completely agree. But with that said, we do know that the trade war and the impending implications on the Canadian economy are really dominating the public mindset. And our conservative political leader has made public comments repeatedly about intentions to cut Canada's foreign aid spending, should they be elected, in favor more of defense and military spending and building up Canada's military presence in the north. So yes, there is tremendous opportunity to flip the script, but we do need to really orient it within the current political discussions here in Canada, ensuring that foreign aid does not become a wedge issue within this election period. So it is a challenge, but I know we're up for the challenge. So just moving forward here, because we have a couple more slides. In terms of the G7 agenda, so the Canadian government has been rather silent on its G7 agenda. It's outlined a couple of early priorities, but nothing has been significantly defined. There isn't a public calendar outlining a full G7 roadmap, at least as of last night when I looked at it. And everyone will get the slides, so you're able to access all of these hyperlinks. What we do know is that there was a G7 Global Health Working Group that was held in mid-March. The key outcomes of that document, that discussion, there wasn't an official communique. I don't believe there's any information at the moment about a future meeting. And we do know that there is likely not to be a health ministerial. And why I say that there's not likely to be is because we are in election period, which means if there is a change in government, then the G7 agenda has the opportunity to shift according to the priorities of the new government. There was a G7 foreign ministerial meeting, and the communique is hyperlinked there. I believe Cooperation Canada will at some point be releasing a statement on that. We know the focus was on peace and conflict as opposed to cuts to foreign aid and how that will impact on global security and global health security writ large. On May 20th and 22nd, there will be the G7 Finance Ministerial. And given that our current new Liberal Prime Minister, Mark Carney, is from the international banking sector, it has been merged with a central bank governors meeting. This is an opportunity that I see for us to have some sort of influence, both in advance of the meeting as well as sharing a statement coming out after the communique. The G7 Leader Summit is planned for middle of June. It's not currently on the website, on the G7 official website. So I think they've taken it off just in the event that there is a switch in dates due to a new Canadian government. But that is the timing currently that is being planned. In terms of Civil 7 updates, so we have a series of 4 Civil 7 working groups under Cooperation Canada. The first one is on sustainable development, and this is where global health is positioned, together with education, food and nutrition. The second is economic justice. The third is climate, energy, and environment. And the fourth is humanitarian action and peace. There have been 2 working group meetings of the Sustainable Development Working Group to help develop the C7 communique. Now, these working group meetings have also been conducted across all 4 C7 working groups, in addition to one global consultation at the beginning of March, which presented the 0 draft, essentially, of the C7 communique. That C7 communique has now been closed and has been delivered as of Friday to the G7 Canadian Sherpa team. The anticipation is that the G7 Sherpa team will respond to Cooperation Canada on the C7 communique with feedback, comments, and areas of hopefully complementarity. This will then formally be launched at the C7 Summit, which is being held in Ottawa, as I said, on the 14th and 15th of April. And I'll share a few slides, one slide, with the C7 Summit plans in just a minute. So at the C Summit, and moving beyond the C Summit, one of the key questions that we have is, how is the Civil 7 going to engage and hold our leaders, especially our Canadian leaders, to account beyond the C7 Summit and the G7 Summit? So lots of advocacy planning opportunities in the future. I'm just going to touch on this briefly because I know we're getting near to time, but this is the C7 structure. Okay, so here we have the steering committee that has been really leading on the organization and the structure of the C7. The second box here are the events that have been held by Cooperation Canada as the C7 Sherpa. The 4 working groups and the cross-cutting themes of democracy, civic space, gender equality, and evolving technology. And then over here on the right-hand side, you'll see the objectives and the roles and responsibilities of the working groups. This is the roadmap and just the outline of the communique. So to be clear, I have not seen the final communique, although I am part of the Sustainable Development Working Group. So I am not clear about what has actually made it into the communique, nor am I clear about the cross-cutting issues, given that health really is intersectional with all of the other 3 working groups. So hopefully next time we meet, I will be able to, or Janet will be able to, give an update on that. The left-hand side box in terms of a timeline just shows exactly the timing of the different meetings and Cooperation Canada's plans and advocacy focus moving forward. Again, a real push for the C7 Summit will be to define a very concrete advocacy roadmap moving forward for the C7, knowing that even, if the G7 Summit happens in June, there are still 6 months ahead of us to be able to influence the agenda and the implementation of G7 recommendations. I'm going to skip this one, which is a little bit more about the C7 communique, and move right into the C7 Summit. So the agenda is in process of being drafted. Again, it's going to be held in a beautiful space in the national capital of Ottawa, at the National Art Gallery. expecting around 70 to 80 participants, and they're exploring hybrid options as well. I believe they're looking at doing a YouTube live feed, which means that for all of us around the world who are unable to join us in person, you will be able to join either through a Facebook feed or a YouTube feed. We'll make sure everyone has the links and engage and ask questions either through a technology like Mentimeter or through a comment section in the YouTube feed. Day one is going to focus on really mobilizing civil society around the shrinking space around us. So as far as there will be panel sessions followed by parallel sessions that will be led by each of the 4 working groups. In day 2, we will focus on external engagement, which is when the C7 communique will be launched, and we will engage in very targeted discussions with embassy and other diplomatic, the diplomatic community here in Ottawa. So more information about that as it becomes available. So next steps and means to influence the G7. So what Janet and I are doing is knowing that the Global Fund and the 8th replenishment is very intersectional, not only across the 4 working groups of the C7, but with all official G7 engagement groups. And so we have targeted the priorities according to what we have seen, and that is the Women's 7, Pride 7, and Youth 7. And so we are engaging and looking at opportunities to coordinate and partner with the other G7 engagement groups to ensure that our messaging, including, most importantly, a fully funded global fund for the 8th replenishment, is also reflected in their communique and the work that they do. We're also coordinating with C20 representatives and coordinating with allies in other working groups as part of the C7 to ensure that our global health messages that are part of the sustainable development component are threaded through and reflected in other components of the C7 communique. There is a potential for a lot of added value and benefit from advocacy papers that help to connect these dots and ensure that our leaders understand why health is such a critical driver of the attainment of the 2030 agenda. We are also looking at developing key messages and talking points that we can all use for our engagement with our respective governments, regardless of whether or not they are G7 governments or BRICS governments or, C20 governments. And we're looking at opportunities for social media campaigns. So thinking forward together, would love to hear your thoughts around key messages that we might want to consider. We'll open this part up for discussion. Some of the ideas that came out of our last call or our first call with the Civil 7 informal working group on global health was no global trade without global health, and ensuring that we outreach and we really message issues around climate and the One Health approach, and really ensuring that there is increased investment to accelerate the implementation of One Health approaches.
So I've just taken the liberty as the host just to mute Robin for a second, with apologies, Robin. If we can leave this slide up, but it is important that we get an opportunity to hear from colleagues if they do have questions. So sorry, Robin, for interjecting, but we do have topics that we do need to move to shortly, but we do want an opportunity for any questions or comments. And I note there's one in the chat already, if we could go with that. And I would just remind colleagues to please use the raised hand or let us know in the chat if you have something that you need to interject on. So we'll leave this slide up, Robin, because it is very helpful. And if we could go to Q&A. Did you have any quick response and Alana's asking about the Global Fund Secretariat's engagement. And I do know we have some Global Fund Secretariat colleagues who are on the call. If they're able to reply in the chat, or we can come to you after we hear first from Janet and Robin.
Thanks so much, Janet. I know that you have to hop off shortly. Did you want to
It's
say any
okay.
final remarks or respond to that question?
So I'm just looking first at the question around the global health profile within the G7 and whether it's been based in the context of US cuts. Certainly that has been a lot of the framing that I've seen. And as Robin said earlier, in the Canadian media context, I think so much of the airtime and media space right now is dominated really by our own political kind of uncertain climate, as well as trade and economic issues with the US, that it's been quite lost of late. But I do remember the profiling specifically was really situated within the US withdrawing, for example, from the WHO. That is kind of how we've experienced it via the media here in Canada to date. I don't know if you've seen anything different, Robin, but
No, I fully agree. I fully
yeah.
agree.
So it's been intermittent at best and very framed within what what the administration south of the border is doing. And then I see the second question: how is the Global Fund Secretariat engaging at the G7 and C7? I don't know if you want to start with that, Robin.
Sure. I mean, before I get to that, I think it's really important to recall that Canada has been a global health leader for many decades, and we have a responsibility to the commitments that we have made. We currently are under with a government, a liberal government, that has a very progressive foreign assistance policy. It's called the Feminist International Assistance Policy. And until there is a change in government, that feminist international assistance policy still is valid. And in there it's all about human rights, human dignity, and the incredibly important role of community and civil society. Canada has also been a leader from the beginning for the Global Fund and is the 7th largest donor to the Global Fund and the host of the 5th replenishment. So there are a number of pieces here that we can draw on and build upon. So I don't think we should lose sight of that. In terms of our coordination with the Global Fund Secretariat, we are very coordinated with the Global Funds Secretariat and working closely with the external relations team in particular to ensure that our messages are coordinated, that our activities are coordinated, and that we are aware of what events are happening that are of benefit and value, not only in terms of intel sharing, but also in terms of presence. So I think I can stop there, but hand it over perhaps to the secretariat if they would like to add.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Like, I know we didn't actually invite anybody from the Secretariat, Alana, and I'm just pressing send on something. But there are a few colleagues from the Secretariat. You're welcome to jump in. You're also welcome to note that not your file probably, but just giving you an opportunity to unmute and jump in if you did want to. Okay. So no worries on that. But Alana, I did sort of say some of the stuff in the past where the Secretariat has kind of focused. And echoing what Robin said, usually a very active conversation and coordination between the C7 colleagues in that Global Health Working Group and the Secretariat. Are there any other?
One of the things that, oh, sorry, go ahead, Katie.
Just to say, if there's any other questions or comments, it would be now that we do need to move ahead to our other agenda item.
The only other thing that I just wanted to flag, I mean, it's not anything currently on the calendar, but we are very interested in exploring opportunities also as a Commonwealth country to connect with, and knowing that the UK is going to be a co-host of the eighth replenishment to really look at ways in which the Canadian government and the UK government can work together on replenishment issues. So stay tuned for that, but we are actively exploring that.
Great. Thank you so much, Robin and Janet. Good luck, Janet, with your legal case today. We're all behind you. And apologies for having to wrap this up as quickly as we do, but we do need to move on to sort of our next set of interventions. So thanks, everyone. I think you all know our colleagues from GFAN Asia Pacific, Rachel Ong and Can Hu, who has been a bit more of a recent addition, but is already very present in our virtual world, appearing on calls and on our listserv. So Ken and Rachel, I'm going to pass it over to you for your sort of update and introduction of the campaign that you are working on in Asia Pacific for the eighth replenishment. So over to you.
Thank you so much, Katie, for the lovely introduction, and it's lovely to meet everyone. I think I see many familiar names here, but I think I see a lot of new ones as well. So let me introduce myself briefly. So my name is Ken. My pronouns are he, they, and I'm based in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. I'm the comms officer with GFAN Asia Pacific, and it's a real pleasure to be part of this call to speak with you and share with all of you on the eighth replenishment, Asia Pacific-led eighth replenishment campaign in support of the Global Fund called #More Now Than Ever. Before I launch into this, I do want to just very briefly congratulate GFAN on the launch of their Here I Am campaign as well, which we are very pleased to be working and coordinating really closely with, as well as with GFAN Africa on their One World, One Fight campaign, which we will see a little bit more right at the end, a bit of a teaser. So back to the More Now Than Ever campaign. Before I launch into the exact formulation of this campaign, I wanted to maybe take us all very briefly down a little bit of memory lane, hopefully, for many folks, with the sixth replenishment campaign that was run by GFAN AP a few years ago. And we had 3 phases to this campaign: Love More, Give More, which was Valentine's Day themed, followed by Heroes Give More, pushing for a last additional push for increased pledges from donor countries, as well as private sector and foundations, and then followed up by a thank you campaign to express our gratitude to donors for their pledges, as well as a coordinated effort for communities to take part and be engaged. That was followed by the 7th replenishment, where we had the campaign titled In Extraordinary Times, The Power of More. And I hope many of you learned or had a chance to participate in our origami crane folding activities. We also had origami elephants. We really wanted to capture a sense of hope and a sense of collectiveness through this campaign, and recognizing as well that the extraordinary times we were going through as an entire globe was the COVID-19 pandemic. So we really wanted to draw attention to the importance of a fully replenished global fund then. But more now than ever, we feel that we need the world to come together again for the 8th replenishment. And this process of the development of our current campaign started in August last year during the SC and Partners meeting in Bangkok. And with an intensive brainstorming session, we defined the messaging and the angles and the themes that we wanted to bring forward for our campaign, which was further refined through a campaign working group, which we we reached out to communications teams with many of our colleagues in Asia Pacific, as well as with Priyanka from GFAN. And through that, we refined our concept, our visuals, and our hashtag. We then had a few webinar sharings with our communities and civil society colleagues through the month of December. And we received feedback, and we received quite a lot of positive response and which led to the ultimate creation and finalization of our campaign visuals and our campaign messaging, which we now are continuing to coordinate on with the Global Fund Secretariat, GFAN, and GFAN Africa, and other partners as well. So very briefly, a quick perhaps overview of the messaging angles that we found we defined in order to ensure alignment in the way that we communicate. We wanted to reach out. We have 7 messaging angles here that we defined that we are weaving into our messaging throughout the campaign period. We are appealing to a sense of responsibility, an appeal to partnership, which is at the core of the Global Fund, an appeal to impact. I think this also goes back to highlighting the return on investment of investing now, the appeal to urgency, the fact that now, more now than ever, there is a need for us to have a fully resourced global fund. The appeal to goals as well, keeping in mind that 2030 is only 5 years away. The appeal to emotions, because keeping in mind that every number is a human story, and finally the appeal to collective security as well, recognizing that diseases know no borders and are a threat that we have to face together. We also kept in mind a few considerations. The first one being that, as I'm sure we all are very, very aware of, there has been a lot of challenges with funding, freezes, funding cuts in the global health and development landscape. So we must weave this and must acknowledge this as well in our messaging. And we're also aware that there has been feedback on the fatigue around the messaging of more. So even as we speak of requiring more, we are also emphasizing that it is not just funding, but we need more accountability and we need more commitment from all partners. So, instead of hearing me speak at length, I think it's best now if we move to a quick video that will explain the key themes as well as the concept of this campaign. So this is our campaign video, and we have this up on our YouTube channel. It is also up on our social media platforms. Please do check it out. We have it translated with the help of many of our colleagues. So if you're here, you know who you are. Thank you so much. We have it translated in 9 different languages, including French. So this can be shared widely. And we also hope to add more languages as time goes on, and we're able to do so. So as you would have seen in the video, we do have 4 key sub-themes focused on the 4 issues, 4 major talking points that we do want to raise. And how we would do that would be through, we have defined a number of channels for awareness. We, of course, will be making use of our social media platforms. I think we do recognize that collaborating and amplifying each other's messages is a very important way for reaching the stakeholders and leaders who need to hear our messages. We are also, sorry, I did not update the slides here, but we are also on Blue Sky, in addition to Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. And we urge you to join us on Blue Sky as we hope to make that our main social media platform to replace Twitter at some point. We also am looking forward for opportunities to engage with the press, media, and news portals to cover stories on HIV, TB, and malaria, as well as to get coverage on major activation events. We are looking for strategic partnerships with communities and organizations, as well as key opinion leaders. We do have a website landing page, gfanasiapacific.org / more now than ever, which is updated regularly, and it contains this video, the information in the video and more, as well as lots of updates from our blog and materials for communities to use. And we also are running and will continue to run webinars and online as well as offline events. More on that later in our calendar. And in terms of the assets that we are producing, we have the campaign video, which
Sorry, Ken, go ahead.
no worries. And we are also creating supporting videos. We have one on the horizon, which we are about to start work on, which we plan to launch as well as use beyond the APLMA Summit, which will be happening in June. We also have social media toolkit, which is created and will continue to be updated, as well as physical collaterals, which we hope to print. And our approach, and this is where all of us come in, is collaboration. I think that has been the key word of this replenishment. More now than ever, we do need to be talking to each other and collaborating with one another. And we are working very closely with global, regional, and national partners. We are reaching out to, we have partners in 22 countries across Asia Pacific that we are in touch with very regularly. And we hope to maximize these collaborations, as well as find the right times for us to raise our advocacy, keeping in mind that we are being very strategic this year. We are also looking at engaging on key political platforms. So presentation earlier was a really good one, and we are also keeping in mind that TCAT is coming later this year, as well as looking at G20 and other opportunities for this. We are also keeping in mind cross-cutting themes and hoping and looking to weave this into our messaging wherever possible. So I wanted to cover a little bit about the updated community engagement event, which we will be having throughout this campaign period. So instead of folding paper cranes, we will be folding paper stars. And we had really positive feedback from paper cranes, and we think paper stars is a great way of continuing that engagement with communities. An additional bonus is that paper stars traditionally also can contain messages. So because they're produced from a strip of paper, we do plan to have events where we encourage communities to write messages within the stars and for the stars to then be read out by stakeholders during, for example, our embassy visits and so on. We are working on a number of statements for International Health Days. So this includes World TB Day, which we published a statement on Monday, together with many of our Asia Pacific partners. And we are looking forward to next month, the statement next month on World Malaria Day. We are also in talks to coordinate a number of embassy events with our partners, and there'll be more information forthcoming soon. So I will just give a very quick, I don't think there's time for much details here, but this is just a quick glance at the calendar of key dates that we have in mind. We have a very busy quarter ahead of us, and we are looking forward to doing a number of embassy visits, as well as mobilizing our thank you letter campaign, which I'm sure many of you would have signed on for. I will just wrap up this presentation with my attempt at a nice sentence to wrap up our collective advocacy. Here I am as one world, one fight. We need a fully resourced global fund, AIDS replenishment to save 23 million lives, more now than ever. And with that, I thank you.
Thank you, Ken. I love the way that we're trying to get all of the GFAN regional partners and our sort of hashtags into one sentence. So they do work well together. I'm very excited about the stars, not as excited about the paper cuts, but I did highlight that I still have my GFAN AP crane container from the last replenishment as a reminder on my desk. So I would open it up for any questions or comments for Ken, although I think there's very clear and a lot of information there, and hopefully we're able to just share this PowerPoint with our call recording for colleagues to refer to again. I think there was a comment about making sure, hoping that video will be available to colleagues, and I'm assuming that of course it will be, and you mentioned other ones. Are there any other questions or comments for Ken around the GFAN AP campaign work? Please feel free to unmute. Go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you for this highlights. Very encouraging. I really love the way about the embassies, visiting the embassies. I just wanted to inquire if you are focusing the embassies that are EU oriented and USA strategical embassies, or you're just going to all the embassies for that intervention. Thank you.
I'll be happy to answer that question. And if Rachel, if you happen to be there, please feel free to jump in as well. I think our embassy visits are usually done in very close collaboration with our country partners. So we do encourage our partners to take the lead on a lot of these engagements. So we work with partners in Asia Pacific countries in coordinating embassy events for the major donor countries. And I think our intention is to, and we are in close communication with our colleagues in many donor countries to find the right time and the best time for these events and for these advocacy activations to take place.
Great. Any other questions or comments? Okay, I think, Ken, it's probably not many questions or comments because you were so clear and sharing lots of information. So thank you again, Ken, and thank you to Robin, and extend our thanks, Robin, to Janet again for the information that you shared around the C7. Just flagging for everybody, if you don't have the chat open, our colleague Ina from APH is sharing a few links and information about a Brussels-based organization activity that APH from the Ukraine did recently, and sharing some ideas there of possible events that might look similar or be similar, and opportunities to reach out to them for more information about that. So just flagging that there, I can speak quite confidently that working with APH on something like a showcase or an exhibition or even a networking zone at the Global Village of the AIDS Conference is a pleasure. Was a great partner for us at GFAN last summer at the AIDS Conference in Munich. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. We're going to wrap up the call and end it, and just appreciate all of you showing up today. We will continue to share meeting invites coming up. I believe we are taking a slight break from GFAN calls because we do have an in-person meeting that's coming up in early April, but you will hear from us and clarity around that very soon for your calendars. And just have a great rest of your days, everybody, and continue to reach out with your work and materials and ideas that you can share with colleagues. So thanks, everyone. Thanks, Ken. Thanks, Robin. Take good care.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks,
Next
thanks
week.
everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.